versus the Rams. The Rams came in with a strong record of 11-4, but were toppled by the Atlanta Falcons, who now stand at 10-6 after a 26-13 win. Matt Ryan pretty much showed the Rams how to get it done. I mean, it was the Falcons were like that slow and steady kind of progression where 2 field goals in the first, a touchdown in the second, 2 field goals in the third, ended the fourth with a touchdown. So they were just hammering along all along. The Rams put the 10 points up in the second quarter, but they just couldn't make it happen as consistently as the Falcons did. So looking at the box scores, I mean, you got Ryan 21 for 30, 218 total yards. And it looks like Julio Jones was his big target of the day with 94 total yards, although you had Mohamed Sanu, putting up an average of 18.8 yards per reception. So some positives there heading into the next round of the playoffs. The Rams are going home. Do you happen to know who was a higher seed in this one, or who was favored in this one?
The Rams were
right, record wise, right? Yeah, because I mean they were looking like the stronger team.
Yeah, but honestly, with this year, I think this shows a great future because the rookie head coach Sean McVay,
right,
and Jared Goff, who wasn't the whole team wasn't supposed to be as good as they were this year, so they have a probable future,
right,
for sure. And I think that definitely the Rams are going to be a scary team to look out for the next years. I would say, especially if Jared Goff is their franchise quarterback, or if they want to make him become a franchise quarterback.
And you got LaMarcus Joyner. I'm just looking at defense. No sacks, but 10 tackles. I mean, he was getting busy in the defense, and then you have Mark Barron right behind him with 8 and then a half sack. I mean, so it looks like the Rams defense, obviously wasn't able to contain Ryan and what was going on there, but on the other hand, putting a lot of pressure on and his guys. So
that's how you win the games. And Matt Ryan does a good job of making teams score points. That's how I think there's so many different ways how you can win big games, but that is one of the ways how you can win big games. If you force the other team to score more points to make it a tough game and a game where you're putting pressure on the other team to win. And obviously, the Rams, they've looked a lot better in like pretty much every single category. Like, Jared Goff looked a lot better this year. He got a good head coach. He also had they had a good running game in Todd Gurley, who's looked good this year. So they do have a good future, and they definitely look like an exciting team coming up.
It's weird though, because if you look at the stats and you look at a very strong defensive showing by the Rams, and then you go over to the offensive stats. I mean, Goff was 24 for 45, which, isn't necessarily all that great, but 259 yards, far more than what Ryan put up. And I had some receivers that put up some big-time yards. Robert Woods with 142. I mean, it kind of looks like on paper the Rams should have won this game. Was there, I'm wondering what obviously the Falcons defense stopped them. Was it like a red zone issue that the Rams were having in the game? Or, what was like the factor that isn't necessarily shown by the stats that came up for the Rams?
The one thing that you can't do in this league is Rams scored a lot of field goals, not a lot of touchdowns.
Right.
You can't go into big games just scoring field goals. You have to score touchdowns.
Yeah.
And when you can't score touchdowns, you can't win games.
Right.
That's just how it is in the league, especially when it comes to the big games. During the regular season, if you're playing like a mediocre team, you might be able to get away with that. But a team like in the playoffs, you can't get away with that.
Yeah, it's almost like you can win by a field goal, but you can't win with field goals.
Yes.
Like you can get yourself in a position that you can win by a field goal, but it's not like you can just put up a whole slew of field goals along the way and expect to compete, especially with somebody or a team at the caliber of the Falcons.
Yeah.
That they've been through the playoffs before. Like they're not new to this. And everybody that talks about Ryan pretty much it's unanimous in that he's got ice in his veins, especially around playoff times. He's unflappable, unshakable.
Absolutely. And obviously they have a good receiver in Julio Jones who knows how to perform well in those big games too.
Yep.
Honestly, this team is going to look exciting. And I forgot to say this, but they're playing the Eagles next week too.
What do you think the outlook is? They're coming up against a really strong defense with the Eagles.
Yes, it's really going to be a good test. The one guy I really think that is a good person to watch on the Falcons offense is Julio Jones, because those cornerbacks these last couple of weeks have looked a little risky.
The Eagles?
Yeah, they've had a hard time.
Specifically who?
Jalen Mills for sure. He gave up a 64-yard touchdown a couple weeks ago to the Raiders, and Amari Cooper gave up a big touchdown to the Giants with not a lot of good receivers.
You think that the Falcons are going to look to exploit
take advantage of that? Absolutely. I can't see them just throwing dump passes. Like Matt Ryan is going to make sure Julio Jones makes a lot of big plays this game. And I think they're going to force him the ball for sure, because obviously Matt Ryan also does a good job of taking advantage of bad defensive players.
Yeah.
And Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby there's two bad defensive players, so they're going to find ways to attack their defense. There's so many different ways, how you can win games. And that's another way, is that taking advantage of their bad
Well,
players.
That's also, and that comes down to play calling too.
Yeah.
Who's the coach for the Falcons?
It's Dan Quinn. He's the head coach.
Okay. Yeah, he seems like he's got a solid strategy as far as exploiting those
Absolutely.
weaknesses.
And they're the favorite in this game too.
The Falcons?
The Falcons are the favorite. The Eagles are not. I think they're 4.5 favorite or something like that.
Okay.
They're not expected to win this game, but I think it's not because because of the injury to Carson Wentz. A lot of people don't think he's going to be able to win.
Right. People aren't giving Nick Foles,
Matt Ryan, the
props.
And I do think that the Falcons can win if they do certain things. Take advantage of their bad defensive players, which is
the cornerbacks.
And on defense, their offense has looked, not great these last couple of weeks. Put pressure on Nick Foles.
Okay.
And their receivers aren't, like a Antonio Brown receiver. They aren't like an AJ Green receiver. They don't really have a number one threat. Maybe Zach Ertz is their best player, but best playmaker. And he's a tight end too.
I always wonder too with Foles, because he really obviously didn't play very much of the season, was a backup role until Wentz gets hurt. And then we had talked about this last week where he sat out most of the game. I think he threw 14 passes, 5 for completions, and then Sudfeld comes in. So I'm kind of wondering, how much rust Foles has to shake off to get back into a really efficient Falcons offense and defense for that matter.
Absolutely. Their defenses looked good too. They've made big plays at big moments this year, and obviously, they're going to find ways to take advantage of their bad players and, rusty players like Nick Foles. Obviously he hasn't been playing well, and, and the receivers aren't the best, so I think that they're definitely I think the Falcons just need to find ways to take advantage of bad players, and that's how they're going to be able to win.
Well, moving to the next game.